Santa Fe. It's a small town, 40 minutes south of Houston. But it feels further. People know each other in this typical Texas town. They're connected. They are a community.
Hey, good job.
But that quiet, peaceful bubble burst on May 18, 2018.
Everybody looks, and then you hear boom, boom, boom.
It's a madhouse. It was a war zone.
I just think this is going to be a bad dream, but it's not.
A gunman murdered 10 people and injured 13 others.
When those shots were going, I'm like, this is it. There's nothing else after this.
This is so surreal. I can't believe this is happening in our community.
This shooting was shocking, but not surprising. It joins a long list that includes Columbine, Sandy Hook, and Parkland, Florida.
If it wasn't for Gary and the other officers that dragged me out of there, I wouldn't be sitting here.
The truth is, school shootings happen.
They can happen anywhere at any time.
And while they still manage to shock and sadden the entire nation,
He loved to laugh and to smile.
eventually the headlines stop, the spotlight fades, and the country moves on. Now, this quiet community and the families that have lost so much are trying to find a way forward.
She died doing what she loved to do.
I need to get help.
If I think about it, I can still feel it, like, to this day.
Santa Fe, 1 year later.
Tonight, we are sharing the stories of the victims and survivors of the Santa Fe school shooting and where they are 1 year later.
And we are starting with the Stone family. Grace White spent time with them. They are still heartbroken by tragedy, but pushing forward to the future.
Spraying it with some butter.
Under a gray sky, spitting misty rain,
Yeah, combine all that.
Chris Stone tends to his cooker at the Galveston County Fair.
Pork butts and a little sausage, some bacon down at the bottom.
He's surrounded by family and friends. But there's one person missing.
You know the fair, that's where my son will be, you know? This is where he would be every damn year.
His son, Chris Stone, who was named after him, was killed in the shooting at Santa Fe High School. He was just 17.
Chris was a very down-to-earth person that all he wanted to do was help.
And a year later, his sisters take comfort in knowing he died helping other students hide in a closet.
He was holding the door, and he got shot through the door.
It was a Friday morning, May 18th, 2018. Most students were already in their first period class.
For Santa Fe High School, need you to stay. School shooting, have an active shooter, several people down.
A student walked into the high school wearing a trench coat and carrying 2 guns and began shooting in an art classroom.
If you're just joining us, reports of an active shooter on the Santa Fe High School campus. The campus is on lockdown.
He killed 10 people and injured 13 others, casting the small Texas town into the national spotlight.
And I just keep thinking that I'm going to wake up and it's going to be all over, and it didn't happen. I just think this is going to be a bad dream, but it's not.
The first calls to police came in at 7:32 that morning. 30 minutes later, police had the shooter in custody. But there were still explosives, pipe bombs found inside the school.
Reaffirm that Subject A is detained and in custody and possible IEDs on property.
While police cars and ambulances raced to the school, Mercedes Stone, Chris's sister, was babysitting when she got word of the shooting.
Instantly, I don't know why, I just knew something happened to Chris. Like, it was a gut, terrible feeling. Like, and I still, if I think about it, I can still feel it, like, to this day.
By 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Governor Greg Abbott arrived and confirmed 10 people were killed.
We come together today as we deal with one of the most heinous attacks that we've ever seen in the history of Texas schools.
But as the hours ticked by, families like the Stones were still waiting and holding on to hope. Some of Chris's family went hospital to hospital looking for him.
Oh yeah, I'm just looking for him. It's Christopher Jake Stone, and we got different middle names. Yes, I've been here, looking for him.
Back in Santa Fe, Chris's mom and other sister were at a staging area for families, but there was no sign of Chris there either.
I didn't bring up that Chris was probably a deceased until our last hospital, and that was Memorial Hermann, right? And we walked in, and on the TV, it's being on the news, 8 confirmed deceased, and I was like, there's a confirmed deceased, and Chris has not called us, and it's 11 o'clock.
As day turned to night, a crowd gathered in an open field 4 miles from the school to remember the victims. Friends there, too, were looking for Chris.
I'm hoping my friend's okay. That's why I'm out here. My friends are here somewhere. I'm trying to find them. I really hope he's okay. But everyone's just assuming he's gone, and I really hope that's not the case.
What's your friend's name?
Chris Stone.
As nightfall cast over the broken town, some 15 hours after those first shots were fired, Chris Stone's name was confirmed among the victims. For his sisters, part of their healing process was walking back into the school and into the art classroom where their brother died.
We go to Chris's spot, there's a bunch of tiles missing, and it's just a lot of emotions were running then. I was still I was in the process of, I want to understand, I want to know how this happened, like who was first, just timeline. I need a timeline in my head. I'm trying to make sense of this.
But they've learned the past year how to use their frustration to fuel change.
This can never happen to anything, because it can and it will.
These sisters drove to the state capitol to fight for the maximum punishment for the shooter.
One of the biggest things that we say a lot is Chris started a fight that day, helping others. He fought against that evil violence, and we have to keep doing that.
And they're keeping tradition at the fairgrounds.
We're doing a pulled pork tonight. Turn-ins at 6 o'clock.
Doing what Chris loved. And anytime anyone asks,
Oh, you're good, man. I don't mind talking about him. That's my son, you know?
they share his story over a plate of the barbecue he looked forward to every year.
The Stones are not alone in their grief. Like Chris Stone, Cynthia Tisdale lost her life during the Santa Fe school shooting.
She was a teacher, but also a beloved mother, wife, and grandmother. Grace White looks at her family's year of grieving for the woman they called Grammy.
There's not a day that goes by that, we all don't think about that day.
Gathered round the kitchen table,
she would go out of her way to help others.
It's been a year since this family lost their Grammy.
I tell them all the time, I'm lost without my best friend.
Cynthia Tisdale was one of the substitute teachers killed at Santa Fe High School.
I didn't think it would happen to us. I didn't think that it was true.
But to her family, her chicken and dumplings is what made her famous.
You want dumplings? You're gonna get dumplings.
She was the matriarch of a family deeply rooted in Santa Fe. It's where her grandchildren go to school. Her daughter-in-law is an elementary school teacher, and her son, a League City police officer, who when he heard there was a shooting, just went.
So I grabbed my vest and I take off.
And I said, have you found Mom yet? And he said, no, we're still looking.
I kind of knew the guys shielded me from the information for a while, just so I could continue to work.
My mom texted me, I remember, and she said, y'all need to come home, right now, we have something to tell y'all.
They buried Grammy a week after the shooting, on her 64th birthday.
It was crazy after that, it was a rough couple days.
5 months later, they lost Grammy's husband, who they called Poppy.
So that day killed him as well.
Dealing with the grief hasn't been easy.
It comes in waves. I think some days you're like, we really have been through it all. But then you think, you got to keep going.
They've made it through this past year by focusing not on the loss, but on what they gained. Grammy was always taking care of someone else.
She just was a very selfless person.
Even in the note she left the morning of the shooting for her husband. Had to go meet teacher. I love you. Hope you feel better today. Love, Mom. Left you breakfast.
Before we go to break, we want to take a moment.
Yeah, we want to remember the 10 people who were killed at Santa Fe High School 1 year ago today.
The newly elected mayor of Santa Fe hadn't even been sworn in yet when the shooting happened, but that didn't stop Jason Tabor from showing up and leading his community.
He shares with Russ Lewis the phone call that changed him and his hometown forever.
I was actually at my house. My kids had just went to school, and I jumped in my car and went straight to the high school to help out anywhere I could.
Jason Tabor would spend hours handing out water to SWAT members, comforting families, and meeting with investigators, always knowing the hardest work was yet to come for him and his town.
There's things you can't unsee, there's things you can't undo.
Right after the shooting, Santa Fe opened a resiliency center where therapists meet with anyone impacted. And the mayor's proud to tell you he's in counseling too.
I'm like a manly man like anybody else, right? I don't like to open my feelings up much, but at the same time, if me doing it will get others to go and look for counseling as well, I think it's very important.
The healing has begun, but 1 year later, only begun for many.
The families who lost somebody, the children who were shot, the kids who were in the closets who witnessed this, they have years and years and years to go through this. So this is not like something's going to go away. This will probably follow them around for the rest of their lives.
And the mayor worries a lot about the kids who have told him they don't want to be defined by one unbelievably horrible day.
They want to be heard. They want to have their senior years right now. They want to have their time in school. And I think sometimes all it is around the tragedy. And sometimes I don't want to lose kids being kids.
And Santa Fe doesn't want to lose its identity either. After all, this is the town that fought for the right for school prayer before the U.S. Supreme Court, a community where neighbors are family.
We help each other out. It's what we do here. And even more since the tragedy, that we help, somebody's hurting, somebody needs help, somebody needs food, somebody needs shelter, anything you need. That's who we are. We do that.
Santa Fe is strong, and people here will tell you that's a lot more than a few words born out of violence. Going forward, Jason Tabor knows the strength needed to heal is more than one mayor can deliver.
And the same community that's got my back, they're holding me up as well. Because I don't have the magic, to be able to do as well. I myself get weak sometimes, and it's very emotional, but we're all in this together, and we're all going to heal together.
Being a leader during and after a tragedy like a school shooting is difficult. There is no playbook. There's no easy path forward.
I sat down with the principal of the high school to talk about how she is leading the school forward as an educator and a mother. How often do you think about that day?
Well, to be honest with you, a lot.
How did you know there was an active shooter? When did you realize it?
I was in the office area when the fire alarm got pulled, and so our procedures are to go make sure all of our students are, safe and out of the building. After I came out of oh my God, what is that? It echoes through the building pretty loud. And so then I realized what was happening. Then definitely my mind immediately went into, okay, I've got to get the police, because we had police on campus, and I knew where they were, and then get the kids to safety, which was additionally scary, because I knew the fire alarm had been pulled, and I was afraid for that. So it became a very focused effort right after that. I don't know that I had a lot of time to think through it until later.
What have been the most difficult days?
First few days of school were rough. Then we got into our routines and started realizing that we can make it through. First fire drill, obviously, that would have been a tough day. That was a tough day. Some of the activities that maybe some of the kids were in, for instance, we had a football player, so first football game, things like that would come up all through the year. And then now, that 1 year marker date is coming up, and so.
Have you had those days where you didn't want to show up?
I think I'm human just like everyone else, and going through something like this is difficult, and watching the kids that you've loved. I mean, I've worked in this district for a long time, and so I've watched these kids. In fact, the graduating seniors last year I had since they were in 6th grade, because I was their junior high principal, and then came to the high school. So I know them very well, and so to watch them, there's days where, wow, this is really difficult, and wouldn't it be easier not to? But for the same reason, I have to. You know, I would never have thought to leave. I would never have thought to not be here this year and next year and the year after to help them get through this because I know what they're going through, and so I would never have not shown up.
To a certain extent, had you, people would have understood, but that was never an option for you.
No.
You never thought, I can no longer do this.
And you know, the funny thing is, the people who know me, my family, my friends, they didn't even ask. They didn't even ask, are you going to stay? That wasn't just me who felt that way. A lot of our staff members would never have thought to leave because they would have been here for the kids.
Who has been your support system outside of the school and your immediate peers?
I have a great family. I have a wonderful husband. I have even my children. My daughter was here that day. She's in college now. So yes, I'm that old.
And how is she doing?
She's doing fine. She's doing fine. She also sought help. And so, but my youngest daughter now goes here. So we all pull together.
What have those best days been?
Well, and some of those worst days were still the best. So like our first football game was one of the hardest days. But then when those guys stepped out on the football field, missing 2 of their members, it was still one of the best days. Another great day was prom. We had more students attend prom this year than we ever have. Sometimes after a tragedy, it's hard for people to feel okay to celebrate. And so some of those things, you know, students, at first they were like, is it okay? Is it okay for us to and it is okay, and they did that. And so to enjoy being a student and enjoy the things that make high school fun and memorable, and they're persevering and doing just that. I can't get over how strong our kids are. You know, it's one thing for an adult to come back into this school to resume something after something like that, you know, after what we lived through, but the kids and kids that were high impact in the art room, but each one of them that have lived through way more than I ever lived through that day. My story is very small compared to theirs, and they're absolutely amazing. And for some, just walking into this building, being triggered on a daily basis for something that was as traumatizing as it is, and then to sit down in a classroom and learn, that's amazing, and that should be commended. That is commendable and honorable that they could do that.
It is hard to process what the people in Santa Fe have been through this past year. But unfortunately, there are people who understand, people who survive school shootings and turn their loss and pain into advocacy and helping others.
Grace White spoke to some of these people, including the former principal of Columbine High School.
How's it going? I'm Grace. So nice to meet you. This is Kyle, my photographer. Thanks for taking some time for us.
It's been 20 years since Columbine. Do you still remember that day?
Every day. Wake up every morning and I recite the names of the 13 who lost their lives. And so there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about, you know, the beloved 13 in the aftermath. And
why did you commit to doing that, to saying those names every morning?
they walked into my school at 7 a.m. and they never went back home. And that made it so difficult. And I can remember that evening realizing that there's nothing I can do to bring them back, but I'm going to do everything in my power that they did not die in vain. There's, like I said, a day does not go by. In my office at Columbine before I retired, I had what I referred to as the wall of 99, and people said, how could you look at that each and every day? And I said, the reason I come back in this school each and every day is because of those 13. And I promised we'll never forget. And we had a mantra at the 1-year anniversary, and 20 years later is as strong as ever, a time to remember and a time for hope. And that's what Columbine represents 20 years later, hope.
What did your grief look like in those early days?
It was tough. My grief, I'm a person of faith. And I'll tell you, I came out of my office that day and my worst nightmare became a reality.
How is your grief different today?
It's different from the standpoint, I got the help I needed. And it was 2 days later, I go down to the church and I'm questioning my faith. And I said, God, how could you allow this to happen? And a priest at that time, who's a dear friend of mine, he said, Frank, you were spared for a reason. Now you need to rebuild that community. And I've been in counseling ever since. And every time the shootings occur, like last year was so difficult with Parkland and Santa Fe, and I just call my counselor to make sure that I have the skills, because I can't help these other communities if I don't help myself.
After Columbine, what did you know you wanted to change in terms of campus and making things safer?
You know, one of the things that's really interesting, and people ask me all the time, what is the one thing that's going to stop these school shootings? And I said, I'm sorry to tell you that. It's not one thing.
What would you say to the Santa Fe community? How did you rebuild Columbine, and what lessons have you learned through that rebuilding process?
You know, the thing that I tell them up front, it's a marathon and not a sprint. And people really feel that you're going to wake up some morning and everything's going to get back to normal, and it doesn't. We had to redefine what normal is. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Definitely.
And good luck with
Thanks.
the launch, and hopefully you get some rest.
The first two police officers to confront the school shooter. One almost died, the other fought to save him.
I was dead for about 3 or 4 minutes on the helicopter. I was just telling myself, just breathe. As long as you're breathing, you're living.
But first, how one of the survivors' love of baseball helped him cope with what happened.
When I go out there in the field, if I'm having a bad day at school, when I go out in the field, it's just everything clears.
Next, the story of a survivor. Trenton Beasley hid in the art room closet the day of the shooting. 2 other classmates died in that closet. A bullet grazed his chest.
Now, a high school junior, he is learning that getting through that day was just the beginning of his journey.
Trenton Beasley loves baseball, and it's the one thing he's turned to get his mind off the shooting.
When I go out there in the field, if I'm having a bad day at school, when I go out in the field, it's just everything clears.
But at first, it wasn't easy. The images Trenton saw that day at Santa Fe High School haunted him.
And there'd be days when I'd wake up in the middle of the night crying, screaming, because I thought I heard something. And it was just a nightmare or a dream.
That's when Trenton decided he needed counseling.
And I could tell a difference down to if you dropped a glass bottle, I'd tell myself, it's a glass bottle, calm down. Just kind of recognize. I've learned to recognize the sounds and tell myself and calm myself down in those situations.
As a parent, it's real hard to see your son go through something like this.
Trenton's mom credits his coaches for helping him cope.
One of his baseball coaches has been his rock. Stayed on the phone with him night after night after the shooting, talking to him on the phone, reading scriptures from the Bible with Trenton.
He's also made connections in unexpected places. On a trip to Florida, Trenton made a pit stop in Parkland to drop off a baseball.
I just wrote a little thing saying, you're not alone.
The simple note fostered a friendship with the Parkland coach over a shared love for baseball and a similar tragedy.
It's just kind of like the same thing, knowing that you're not alone, knowing that they've gone through it and they understand what you're going through.
The two exchanged T-shirts, and on the 1-year mark for Parkland, Trenton wore theirs to show his support. Back on the field, Trenton says it's his teammates that put him at ease.
They know what I'm going through, and I always know that they're going to be behind me no matter what.
And he hopes other students can learn from what it took him to get back in the game.
To let others know that if you're going through something like this, you're not the only one going through it. That it's affected more people than you can ever think. It's affected people from other states. I've talked to people that messaged me and told them that it's made them look a different perspective, knowing that it could happen to them.
The two moms you are about to meet understand grief and have lived with it for the last 6 years since their daughters were killed at Sandy Hook Elementary.
Somehow they took their pain and loss and channeled it into becoming advocates and activists for school safety.
I'm Michelle Gay. I'm Executive Director and co-founder of Safe and Sound Schools. I'm the mother of Josephine Gay, who was tragically killed in the Sandy Hook tragedy.
I am Alyssa Parker, and I lost my daughter, Emily Parker, at the Sandy Hook school shooting as well.
These two moms turned tragedy into action.
There was no conscious decision to do this. It just organically happened. All of our conversations circled around the things that we were learning, the improvements that could be made, how schools could really raise the bar. And we just felt like the conversations had been so polarized and talking in the political realm, and we felt like we were missing an opportunity to really learn from this tragedy. And so as those conversations continued to happen, this idea popped in our heads, and it was just, well, let's start telling people.
So they did. 6 years later, they are fighting for safer schools, sharing their stories, their lessons learned.
I'm proud of the two of us. If I'm being honest, this has been a really tough journey for the two of us, and there was a lot of people who underestimated.
Two moms, yeah.
Two moms, but also underestimated our message.
Still to come, some Santa Fe students who wanted to make a difference after the shooting, how they stepped up and continue to do so. Plus, an officer shot confronting the Santa Fe shooter, his fight for life.
I knew he was a tough son of a gun, but I didn't know how tough till now, so it was hard to go down and see him like that.
It was 1,800 seconds that changed everything.
School shooting, have an active shooter, several people down.
It's been happening everywhere. I've always kind of felt like eventually it was going to happen here too.
I'm Grace White, and in this series, my colleague Matt Kaiser and myself will share the stories of the people who were affected by the shooting at Santa Fe High School and where they are 1 year later.
I've learned that you need to have fun while you're still here.
If it wasn't for Gary and the other officers who dragged me out of there, I wouldn't be sitting here.
When those shots were going, I'm like, this is it.
This is Santa Fe, Life After the Shooting, a 6-part series on the tragedy that unfolded at Santa Fe High School and the lives it's forever changed.
Two brothers in arms, the first two officers to confront the Santa Fe shooter.
They had only known each other for 4 months before the shooting, but now they have a bond for life. Grace White shares their story.
If it wasn't for Gary and the other officers who dragged me out of there, I wouldn't be sitting here.
John, how are you doing 1 year later?
Good. I mean, I wear this sleeve a lot more now because I had an infection in December, and the docs told me wearing the sleeve will help fight that infection.
Were you already together that morning, or did you unite at that moment?
I mean, we were both at the high school that day. John's office is actually up in the front of the building, up right off of the main office, and my office is in the back of the building in one of the academic wings. It's actually an old classroom. So we're kind of on opposite ends of the building.
Did you hear it and run? Did somebody say help?
No, it's actually a fire alarm went off. And so we were kind of reacting to the fire alarm. I feel it was the end of the year. Fire alarm went off. I think kids were pulling a prank.
And they're acting like it's just another fire alarm. And they're hooping and hollering, they're high-fiving each other, and I'm thinking to myself, well, if this is a shooting, why are these kids acting like there's nothing going on?
When you heard those shots, did you know immediately school shooter?
It's not fireworks. It's not, I mean, it was definitely not something that was dropped. It was shots. I knew it was shots as soon as I heard them, which is why I ran that direction.
My arm just barely got around that corner when I was shot. I never saw him. I never knew where he was when he shot me.
Gary, what made you decide to put that tourniquet on John?
All of my years on the job and all the injuries I've seen, I've never seen anything like that. Catastrophic blood loss to that magnitude ever.
John, we heard from people that thought you might not make it.
Well, I was dead for about 3 or 4 minutes on the helicopter. I was just telling myself, just breathe. As long as you're breathing, you're living.
Gary, what was that like when you visited John in the hospital the first time?
I knew he was a tough son of a gun, but I didn't know how tough till now. So it was hard to go down and see him like that.
People have called you guys heroes. What do you think about that?
That can happen any day. You know, you put that badge and gun on and your uniform and you go to work, you never know what you're going to walk into.
4 young women with a lot of heart decided they wanted to make a difference.
These former Santa Fe students started a nonprofit after the shootings. Marcelino Benito looks at how they are helping others.
Difficult memories from that dark day in Santa Fe still pain former students like Grace Johnson.
Shots were being fired in the hallway right next to me. We all hid in an attic space that was probably only about 50 feet away from where, unfortunately, 10 people lost their lives.
In the years since, they felt hurt, guilt, and unbelievable responsibility.
I always want to honor their memory in everything that I do, and so it is a big inspiration to me.
It's why days after the shooting, Annabelle O'Day, a former Santa Fe High senior, knew something needed to be done.
This gunman, he came in and he changed our lives, and he destroyed some of them. And you can't go back and change what happened, but you are in control of how you react to it.
Their reaction is helping change lives. Annabelle, Grace, Madison McCaskill, and Caitlin Richards together run Hearts United for Kindness, a nonprofit focused on mental health awareness and kindness.
Let's do something that will bring people together, because that's what we needed in that time, and I feel like that's what society needs.
Together with community partners like the Houston Dynamo, Hearts United raised nearly $30,000 and awarded more than $20,000 in scholarships and grants to seniors and survivors of the shooting.
We are definitely making progress of lifting the stigma around mental health.
They're also providing resources for those suffering from PTSD. Their message resonates because they were inside Santa Fe High the day of the shooting.
I hope to be able to go to other communities after something like this happens and help them and be able to let them know that you have support from other people, other survivors.
Their work in the aftermath of the shooting has earned them recognition from a Houston hero.
I'm inspired by you.
J.J. Watt surprised the girls when he presented them with the 2019 Sportsmanship Award at the Houston Sports Awards this year, a testament to their dedication and fight to make Santa Fe and the world a better, kinder place.
So much happens after that shooting that originally your town will come together and then they will divide. And it's up to you to figure out how to bring them back together.
For these 4 girls, kindness was the only answer. And thanks to them, Santa Fe is stronger than ever before.
Now we want to share with you the story of a parent who lost their child, not at Santa Fe, but at a school shooting in Colorado.
He has become an advocate for school safety and shares his story to help other families and push for change. Here again is Grace White.
I love you guys. It's the last text Emily Keyes sent her parents, Ellen and John Michael Keyes, before being killed by a school shooter in 2006.
We started the I Love You Guys Foundation within days of losing Emily. And we work with schools and districts, departments, and agencies around the U.S. and Canada in the area of crisis response in schools.
Their programs have been implemented in 25,000 schools, including here in Texas.
What's been the hardest part about losing Emily?
It's been 13 years now, and her twin brother, he's doing great. He's a remarkable young man, but it's a lifetime since 16. And Emily's still frozen at 16.
What advice would you give to the families here locally in Santa Fe?
There's a path through this, and it isn't always an easy path, but try to approach it with a little courage.
The case against the alleged shooter. We talked to the lawyer defending him. Plus, how survivors and victims' families pushed the federal government to file charges against the alleged Santa Fe gunman.
I just want to thank everyone in the nation who has stood up for Santa Fe.
So far, we've focused on the victims and survivors of the Santa Fe shooting. Now, a look at the accused gunman.
There are 2 different courts seeking justice. The first one is out of Galveston County. A judge granted a change of venue. His defense attorney calls that a victory, and he spoke with Jason Miles about the case.
From his small law office near the Kemah Boardwalk, defense attorney Nick Pale prepares for a very big trial.
Capital murder of two or more persons and aggravated assault on a peace officer.
Pale is representing Demetrius Pagarchis, the now 18-year-old accused of killing 10 people inside Santa Fe High School.
The last several months have been about reviewing discovery, reviewing the evidence. There were obviously hundreds of witnesses, hundreds of witness statements.
Pale admits that questioning whether his client was the culprit is not part of his planned defense.
I don't anticipate making any factual disputes about what's alleged to have occurred, no.
He says much of what he'll seek from a jury will be based on the results of extensive mental and physical evaluations. And he and his team are relieved that jury will come from somewhere other than Galveston County.
Far too many people, new people or new people who knew people that were actually impacted.
Pale says the change of venue request was primarily based on what he calls internet urban legend, made up of gossip and social media rumors about the shooting.
The client's eventually going to be in front of a jury, and those people have to be open-minded and as unbiased as possible for him to have his right to a fair trial.
A trial Pale expects will be lengthy, given the extremely weighty nature of this case.
The Galveston County District Attorney's Office declined to talk about the case outside of court.
The victims and their families were not content with just local charges being filed against the accused shooter. They pushed the federal government to get involved.
May 18th, 2018 is a day that lives infamy locally, statewide, and nationally.
United by a tragedy.
8 children were murdered, 2 teachers were killed in a mass school shooting.
Santa Fe families who have endured unimaginable loss and pain finally got word their one request was granted.
I just want to thank everyone in the nation who has stood up for Santa Fe.
After calling elected officials, writing letters, and spreading the word on social media,
it tells you that our system does work whenever there is enough outcry.
These families forced change, and now the feds are stepping in.
This is the only justice that I think that's legit, that should be served for us families.
It matters because if the accused shooter was only tried locally, he could get parole after 40 years. In a federal court, the minimum sentence is about 100 years.
Obviously, we hope that there never is another school shooting, but ultimately at some point I hope that the powers to be look at these in detail, and maybe anybody in the future that's going to think that they're going to conduct a school shooting may think twice about being prosecuted federally as well.
Because the accused shooter was a minor, the federal proceedings are closed, so we don't know exactly what charges he's facing.
After the break, school safety and what is and isn't being done.
Politicians talk about making schools safer since Santa Fe.
We're going to have to be creative. We're going to have to think out of the box.
But what is actually being done?
When do the mom and dads go to the schools and see the limited entrances and the double pane glass, the extra officers?
After the tragedy at Santa Fe, there were promises made to help make schools safer. Politicians talked about everything from putting metal detectors in all schools to arming teachers.
But a year later, what's actually happened? Cheryl Mercedes talks to 2 of Texas's most powerful politicians to find out.
School shooting, active shooting, several people down.
When tragedy struck, Senator Ted Cruz and Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick were among the first to arrive in Santa Fe.
There have been too damn many of these. This must end, and we must do everything we can.
Santa Fe High School had a safety plan. It was one of 186 schools in Texas that earned a state safety award. There were 2 armed police officers at the school, plus a roving officer. Yet the shooter was able to sidestep it all.
We're going to have to be creative. We're going to have to think out of the box.
Patrick and Cruz say because of that, every school in Texas needs to be surveyed and the number of entrances and exits drastically reduced.
If you have 1 or 2 entrances and you have officers right at the entrance, you can stop the shooter before they get in.
But modifying schools could cost millions of dollars, and that's something school districts simply do not have. Patrick points to 2 bills passed this legislative session that he says can help make it happen.
We've committed, again, almost $250 million
in this budget.
A portion of it comes from Senate Bill 10, which designates $100 million toward creating more training in mental health services. Senate Bill 11, known as the School Safety Bill, covers a number of proposals laid out in Governor Greg Abbott's school safety plan. Some of those include mental health professionals in Texas school districts, training and arming teachers, and identifying potentially dangerous students. The money is there. Patrick says school officials just need to ask for it.
The money can flow pretty quickly. Some schools don't want metal detectors. I've had parents say, I don't want my school to look like a prison.
Last year in Washington, Congress authorized nearly $1 billion for school safety measures, including adding metal detectors and armed police officers. It is something Senator KHOU had been pushing for since 2013. KHOU says the money is being distributed right now.
When do the mom and dads go to the schools and see the limited entrances and the double pane glass, the extra officers? When do they see that?
Look, all of that is going to happen district by district as they apply for these funds.
How quickly can it happen if everything's done on time by every district?
It should happen sooner rather than later.
In the next year, say next school year?
Look, I'd like to see it happen tomorrow.
5 years?
It should be much faster than that. There is a simple reality that the giant machinery that is government does not move as fast as sometimes we would like.
Since talking with us, Senator KHOU on Wednesday announced 2 new bills he's pushing he says will make schools safer.
He announced the bills after reading the names of the victims of the Santa Fe shooting.
Christopher Stone, Cynthia Tisdale.
One piece of legislation called the School Safety Enhancement Act would allow school districts to apply for grants to pay for metal detectors and bulletproof doors, and developing a system for sharing information between schools, law enforcement, and parents. The second bill is the Protecting Communities and Preserving the Second Amendment Act. That would strengthen criminal background checks and provide stronger laws to prosecute felons who try to buy guns. When we come back, images of Santa Fe, then and now.
For many people, these are the images of Santa Fe etched in their minds. Violence, loss, a horrific event that should not have happened.
We want to thank you for joining us tonight to remember those taken from us and the survivors.
And as we leave you, we want to share with you the pictures of Santa Fe today, a community stronger and moving forward.